Thank you. Good evening and welcome to a virtual meeting of the Residents' Education and Environmental Services Policy Overview Committee of the London Borough of Hillingdon. This virtual meeting is also being broadcast simultaneously on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon London. My name is Councillor Bridges and I'm the chairman of this meeting. A key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of residents' interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents, and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. For those present during the meeting intending to speak, please note that you will be filmed and any statements that you make will be recorded and made public. Some online housekeeping before we start. Please ensure any mobile phones around you are on silent. If you're wearing a headset, ensure a microphone is away from your mouth to avoid noise. Please keep your microphone muted when not speaking and then unmute to speak. Only one person may speak at a time and I, as chairman, will call those to speak. And with that said, we're going to an attendance roll call. So could the councillors present please confirm their attendance when I say your name? Councillor Morgan, the Vice Chairman.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, I'm present.
Councillor Vardia.
Good evening, Mr. President. I'm present.
That was a quick promotion. Councillor.
Congratulations, Wayne.
Councillor Kaufman.
Yeah, I'm present, Chairman.
Councillor Chapman.
Evening, Chairman. Yes, I'm present.
Councillor Rodriguez.
Good evening, Chairman. Yes, I'm present.
Councillor Sullivan.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
The opposition lead, Councillor Sweeting.
Yes, I'm present, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Mavers.
Good evening. I'm present.
And our co-opted member, Mr. Tony Little.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
Thank you very much, everyone. Also, please can the officers present indicate they are also present in the meeting. Debbie Scarborough.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
Thank you. Laura Palmer.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
Paul Richards.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
Dan Kennedy.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
And the Democratic Services Officer, Neil Fraser.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you very much. In terms of technical meeting control, if any councillor leaves the virtual meeting partway through for a period of time, example, a lost connection, I will continue the meeting unless we are not quorum. Quorum is 5 councillors. Importantly, any councillor who does leave the meeting for a period of time will not be able to vote on that item they were not present on. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are available on the YouTube channel underneath the broadcast. We move on to our main agenda. We have no apologies for absence. So item 2 is a declaration of interest in matters coming before this meeting. Are there any? No. I can confirm that all business this evening will be discussed in part 1. There are no part 2 items, which brings us on to item 4 to agree the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 8. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I was going to agree all this, but just a comment about agenda item 5 from last month, the statement of licensing policy consultation. I did send a number of comments and notes to the officers and they have come back, and I gather that that has been or will be forwarded to all councillors here tonight.
The clerk distributed them this afternoon, Councillor Morgan. Any other issues from the minutes? I cannot see anyone indicating. Councillor Sweeting, are you indicating?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
If you look at page 1, item 16, which is concerning the update on the MEs, it does say regarding the annual complaints, ask the clerk to chase an outstanding action relating to members' inquiries by ward. Now that's been going on for some time now. I think it was September last year that was raised. So I don't know whether there's any follow-up on that.
Neil, would you like to come in, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Sweeting. I did chase that on the committee's behalf. I've been referred to the group offices, actually. My understanding is that the group offices receive an update with this detail every month. So it's been suggested that members who are interested in that kind of data should source that from their group offices.
If I can just come back on that, that will mean, therefore, that nowhere in the report that's open to the public will that information be available.
Yes, that is noted. If you recall, Councillor, the request was subject to approval for inclusion in future reports. I'm unsure whether that is yet to be approved. Well, I understand that is yet to be approved. So in which case, I will continue looking into it for you.
Thank you very much. Yes, because I do believe that it's not an issue of that's under any sort of control, that it can't be shared with the public via the reports that we get.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeting. I cannot see anyone else indicating, so I would assume those minutes are agreed. Thank you very much. Item 5, our information item on the adult and community learning services, pages 9 to 20. Good evening to you, Debbie. I understand you'll be presenting tonight's report, so whenever you're ready, please.
I sent the report through. I might need a little bit of guidance from you, Chair, if that's possible, because I'm not sure. I've only done one of those before, and the last time we did one, I just answered questions, so I may need a bit of guidance about how much information you'd like, having provided the report. I don't want to overkill and do too much detail when you've read it already. So, could you give me some?
Thank you, Debbie. I would invite members for their suggestions. I mean, as you know, members should be reading the report. So, what officers usually do is just sort of give a brief overview of that report. And as you said, assuming that members have read the report, there should not be a requirement to go through it unless members indicate they wish for a report to be given. I cannot see anyone saying yes. So in which case, are we happy to go straight to questions? Okay, in which case I'll invite questions from members, Debbie. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Chairman. Because of COVID-19, many people have lost their jobs, and adult community learning can be a major vehicle for the retraining that will be needed. Also, the boost in demand for specific courses will need to be carefully considered. COVID also leads to more people using the service during lockdown for the first time and may wish to continue to bring a new challenge to their lives. There is a developing demand for cultural diversity in the learning to address the lower figures from the data within some ethnic minority groups. Stress and issues with mental health have been addressed by many of the mindfulness courses. These need to be maintained. Now, I'm going to go further on this just to say that these are a few reasons that lead me to propose that this committee take adult and community learning as one of the next review topics. I have some other questions, but I will leave that open to other councillors to ask theirs first. But as I say, I will propose this for our next review topic and offer it open to other councillors and you, Chairman. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Kaufman. Before we go on to that, did you have any questions specifically for Debbie for you to answer?
Yeah, Ofsted in December 2019 judged the service to be good. What are we doing to improve that, Debbie?
We're working so hard to improve it. It's a huge leap between good and outstanding. We are doing really well towards it. Obviously, they look at the obvious things such as results from exams and issues, the clear things that you would look for, and that's why they've, up until last year, of course, we were on an improving trend, but of course with 1920, with the lockdown, things went slightly awry. Lots of people just couldn't attend classes, and that retention issue affected us the same way it did every other college and every other adult ed provider. In terms of specifics, one of the things that Ofsted identified in their report, they actually identified 3 things. One of them was that there was an inconsistency they found about the way that when students are submitting work, their spelling, punctuation and grammar was not constantly addressed by all tutors, and understandably, I agree. I think they should be. So we've actually got some training starting in about 2 weeks' time to address that with our tutors. So we've got a decent training program coming in, which we're really pleased about. The second one was around progression, and we've got a system in place that captures all of our data. And one of the things that we struggle to get reports on is about how people will go from class A to class B to class C, so that you can actually plot what's happening. Although we know the students individually, so we know they're progressing, it's difficult to get the data. So that's another thing. We're actually having our system renewed in the next 6 months. And so it's one of the things we want to work on with the providers so that we can get those reports through. And we've put quite a lot of work into making sure that people can progress as easily as possible, particularly during the last summer, because we didn't want them, we wanted to decrease the footfall in the centres because of social distancing. So we came up with new ways of doing it, which we're really pleased with, and we're going to be building on those. And the third thing was about just somebody in terms of officers and potentially members being very sort of clear about being able to do exactly what you are doing this evening, which is the support and the challenge for me as a service manager coming from the council. And there are several elements of that. One is that it just happened to correspond with a time that Councillor Simmons had moved on into another role, and Councillor O'Brien was coming into place. That happened to be when they arrived. But in addition to that, I think there are some conversations underway about me working a little bit more closely with the education when that post is appointed, so that somebody with an education background can say, you know, what do you mean by this? How does that work? What would you like specifically with that? Above and beyond, of course, the support that I already get from Paul and Dan and from yourselves. And so it's just, they kind of like, they like something quite specific in terms of sort of advisory boards and things like that. And so where I think our systems aren't quite the same thing, it's about making sure that I can demonstrate that support and challenge is in place. And I think actually, if a review happens, that would be a good example of that. So they're the immediate things that we're doing, but there's so much.
Councillor Kaufman, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Could you tell us, Debbie, what's causing the disparity of take-up between the north and the south of the borough, which is, it seems an enormous gap?
Well, I think that we've got, just let me get the right page. As far as I remember, we've got 2/3 of our learners from last year are in the south, which we're really proud of, because generally they're the people that are the hardest to reach. And that's partly the result of a big push to reach people in the south. So actually, the demography is quite reflective of the work we've been doing to reach our target groups. This is a huge generalisation, but you do tend to find there's a greater proportion in the south who are low skilled, low paid, in perhaps disadvantaged groups, or deprived areas, and so that's actually the group that we're trying to reach. Generally speaking, we are, of course, we're open to that. We've got centres in the north. I mean, we've got a lot of people that do come in from the north. I think we're going to see an increasing. We're not going to see that gap narrow, particularly at the moment, because quite often the people that come in from the north are people who have potentially retired, who are coming in for courses that are about their own personal development. I mean, we get a wider range. That's too narrow, but generally speaking, and of course, because they tend to be older people, with the impact of COVID-19, they were the first people to stop attending courses and to be perhaps a little reluctant to go on to online as we tried to move courses online throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. So there are a few reasons, I think, why currently we've got fewer people going into those courses. It's not something I'm very worried about at the moment, because I think that it's very typical of what is going on currently. I don't think it's that the demand isn't there generally. I think that that kind of provision that they're going for has always been very popular. I think it's just a natural nervousness about coming into centres, about doing those things. And when we try to put courses online, sometimes they are the people that are a bit less confident about digital skills.
Thank you very much. Mr. Little.
Thank you, Chair. Debbie, thank you for the report, and thank you for the efforts that are being made to make the service cope with the difficulties of COVID. What didn't come over to me in the report is how we measure our achievement compared to other areas. Are we doing as well as our neighbouring boroughs in terms of the achievements of the students, and as also as regards the reach that we have, the number of students compared to other areas?
We don't tend to measure the number of students per se against other areas, because it can be, numbers of students can be very misleading in adult education. If you've got compulsory education, you know that those children are going to be going to school. It's compulsory for a reason. You know, you've got a very clear head count that you can compare with other people. But with adult education, it's a bit more complicated, because adults come into education for lots of different reasons, and they come to do different courses. I work very closely with my peers across West London, and each year we write a self-assessment report. We're not far from finishing ours actually this year for 1920. And we move those between myself and my peers, and we provide support and challenge together so that we compare each other's reports. And we say, well, that doesn't seem to have much evidence, or this does, or that's really good, or that isn't. So that we act as that barometer for each other, and we can benchmark. But this year we're just at the point we're finishing reports ready to do that, because they're supposed to be submitted in December. So we tend to get together in November to do those swaps and have those meetings. I'm not sure if I've answered your question, Denny. Have I missed it?
I think you covered it in terms of the number of students, but not so much in terms of the level of achievement.
Oh yeah, sorry. Level of achievement, again, that comes as part of the self-assessment report. So each year we will be identifying those figures. I've got something down here. Hold on 1 second. I can tell you. Our achievement rates for this year are about 78, for last year rather, about 78%, which is actually very good. Our pass rate, so, okay, sorry, I'm using jargon. If you've got a class and you've got, say, 10 people in it, everybody that joins that class, ideally, you want them all to finish, you want them all to achieve. So let's, for argument's sake, take a qualification course. You want to achieve it. So what you want is an achievement. Now, obviously, that doesn't happen. Some people just try really hard and just don't. Other people, for various reasons, withdraw from the course. So supposing you get 8 out of 10 people that finish you will have an 80% achievement rate. And our achievement rate for 1920 is about 78%. Alongside that, there's also something called the pass rate. And that is that of your 8 people that you're left with, how many people passed? And our pass rate is in the 90s, it's something like 91, 92%. So all the people that stayed with us to finish their qualifications and pass their courses was over 90% despite COVID. So although we haven't yet benchmarked the figures with my West London peers, I'm expecting them to come out fairly strong. Because we all are different sizes of services. In Hillingdon, we have probably the 3rd lowest allocation of funds from the government of all the West London providers. Everybody else has got higher amounts, and two services, I believe, have got lower figures. You can't do a natural numbers in terms of, well, I've got 100 learners and you've got 150 learners, because some services have got £3 million as an allocation figure, and we're approximately half that. So that's why I was saying the numbers you can't quite as easily compare like for like, because they're different. So hopefully I've explained that now.
Thank you very much. Mr. Little, I know you asked for clarity on your first question, but do you have a supplementary you wish to ask?
Not a supplementary in that sense, but I do think, given all the extra information that Debbie's giving us, that a review would be a good thing.
Thank you. Councillor Mavers.
Thank you, Chair. When Debbie last spoke to us, we saw that this service was very good money for Hillingdon residents, because Hillingdon proportionately provides very little funding, and the majority of funding comes from the GLA and other sources. I do want to congratulate officers for the extra funding they've gained through the COVID period in order to shore up the service. I said to myself, public sector is very similar. The funding is vital to things moving. I think with all opportunities in life, more resources are needed in times such as these. With the plan in place and the clear strategy that the service has to continue to improve and to continue to target, and it's clear that the targeting is working for the most disadvantaged. It's working in those areas where people need to professionally develop as well as personally develop. With the loss of funding from course fees, so I think it halves because of COVID, are there safeguards in place to ensure that we keep that broad offer that we have for personal development across the borough, but also to ensure that the vital courses that link to employability, maybe ESOL and other things, that they are still able to continue without being affected by the
census project next year, working with officers in other parts of the council to try to help people complete census online in the spring. In terms of the personal development courses, they tend to be the things like languages and arts and crafts, things that people do to sort of de-stress after work. As I mentioned earlier, they are very often populated by people in the north. We don't tend to get as much demand for those in the south. And frequently they are populated by people that are potentially a little older, who maybe have had their careers and want to just keep the brain cells going and so on. And they have been disproportionately affected in terms of the recruitment and the retention during the COVID period. That has a couple of knock-on effects. One is that what we would love to be able to do is to say, well, actually, if you're choosing not to come and join us because, you don't want to risk anything, if it's just a personal choice, that's absolutely fine. If it's that you would still like to learn, but you're nervous about your digital skills, we've got a huge digital skills push going on at the moment, and we will do for the next few years. And we're trying to reach those people in as many ways as we can. But there's a bit of me that's also, you have to be very careful, because you can't kind of press gang people into doing courses. So we are we're doing a little bit of a wait and see at the moment. We've currently got about 37% of our current enrolments are those community learning courses, and that's normally higher. That would usually go a bit higher than that at this stage. To some extent, we have to wait and see what happens. It's very difficult we have to be reactive in a lockdown situation. So I'm kind of focusing on the things that I know we can make a difference with helping people fill in their EU settlement status documents. I know we can make a difference there. I'm not sure at the moment we can make a big difference to people who are choosing not to come because they're perhaps not able to go to their house in Spain, or for whatever reason it is that they're learning with us. So it's there's a little bit of a watch and see at this point. Obviously, in terms of the income, the knock-on effect of that is that a fair chunk of our fees come through those Spanish arts, crafts courses, and we are expecting a considerable fee income reduction this year. And I think that's just something that we're going to have to work through. I mean, I'm watching the budgets, of course, very, very carefully, but I think that if the demand is if this is about the impact of COVID, I would expect it to pick up again later this academic year or possibly into next year, and we might just have to ride through this. If it's more than that, then we need to be thinking about something else, and we're going to see that as we go through the year. It's very difficult to predict what the reasons are. We can only go by our instincts, really.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mavers, do you have a follow-up at all? Before you answer that, sorry, if there's any other members who do wish to ask questions, I may have missed you, so please indicate now. Thank you very much. Councillor Mavers?
Thank you, Chair. It does sound like that, and from this report as well, that the service has really adapted well to the challenge of COVID and to the needs of the area. I personally feel it's quite because there is so much wait and see, and we want to see how things develop. It does seem kind of premature to do any review on the service, and also when we've got such a clear plan of the way ahead and a very sort of switched on service in terms of adapting. That'd be better to not review or to do a major review on this sooner rather than later. The one thing that does interest me is that there obviously is a pause in the provision for those with disabilities, and this is a fundamental. Adult learning is a fundamental aspect of those individuals' routine, but also their continued personal development, but not just in their learning, but also that. The effects of maybe isolation or mental health, I suppose, complications or just lower mental health or esteem because of the impact of the pandemic, which is experienced by all groups and individuals across the country. What is the usual provision that you put in place to support students and staff in their mental health, and how have you adapted that in light of COVID?
Okay. So two things there. Firstly, with the mental health, we're actually really pleased with how that's going. What we did was we've had an optional self-assessment that people have been offered and been completing for the last few years. We piloted it after the initial project we were involved in. It was an externally funded project that got us going in this. We developed it after that, and we've been refining it over the past 2 or 3 years. And when this hit, we put it online, and we've been really, really pleased with the results. We've actually got more people now filling that in and choosing. It's always been optional to fill that in than we ever had before when it was left to tutors to hand it out. So, and I think it's probably partly because there's more privacy, I suppose. If you're sitting in a classroom and you're handed this, you may or may not want to. And as much as we've worked around it as much as we could, what we've found is far more people are coming through, which is great because it means that we know who it is that's self-identifying as somebody with well-being mental health concerns. And we've got a very small, it's only a couple of people, but a team in place who are right there ready to contact them and support them. And it means that we can target those interventions where they can be of most use. So actually, ironically, because we adapted what we did through COVID-19, we've actually found that we've improved the take-up of that, which in turn means we can put the support in. And we're getting really good feedback about that. So I'm really pleased about that. In terms of adults with learning difficulties, absolutely. When all this hit, it was 2 weeks before we finished the spring term, when we were suddenly looking at facing our first lockdown. And there was just no way that that target group could cope with online learning. Since they came back, we changed the way, we adapted the way we did our recruitment of that group, and we made lots of telephone calls, one-to-one phone calls with local classes they want. And those classes are now running again, and there's a much greater emphasis. We put the tutors through training to teach them how to deliver online with that particular group, and we are gradually increasing the amount of online exposure they get, so that if we have to lock down formally and completely again, we should be in a stronger position to try to keep that going with them. Currently, with this lockdown that's imminent, we have kept those courses in the buildings. So we prioritised the rooms that we had when we did all of our usual, you can imagine all of the social distancing and the way we organised our centres. We prioritised those with LDD. We continue to do that so that we've got far more courses running online now. Because luckily we've had a half term, we've been able to teach new learners who are coming into the service how to manage online learning. And so we've got more courses going online in the next few weeks. And we are keeping all of the adults with learning difficulties still coming into centres at the moment, because they'll be the main people that are using them. What we have done though is we've been working with the tutors so that they can feel more confident, so that there's more confidence and they feel less intimidated by going online to learn. One of the barriers we're finding is that often they will say to us, "Oh, but I haven't got a laptop, I haven't got any internet access, I haven't got..." And from knowing those people, what we think is going on is that oftentimes they might not have a laptop, but actually their parents or their carers or the home that they live in or wherever they live do have access to laptops, do have a Wi-Fi, which these guys will swear blind they don't have. So we're just talking at the moment about possibly getting letters out to some of their parent carers. And obviously, you have to bear in mind these are adults, so it's not that it would be just to them. We'd write to the learner and say, is it possible that, we could do a short sort of an introductory session to show you how to support your child, but obviously they're not, so that they can still engage online. Because I think with just a little bit of support with the people that actually do live with, they could continue those classes really easily, should we have a full lockdown. But at the moment, they're the priority group to stay in the centres.
Thank you very much. We've been on this item for about half an hour now, so I wish to draw this to an end. But I will take another question.
I'm sorry, Chair. I've been indicating right from the very start to...
Indeed, you have Councillor Sweeten, and if you listen carefully, I was just about to say we will finish with Councillor Sweeten's question, and then I want to discuss the recommendation too, and we'll bring it to a close. So, Councillor Sweeten, you may ask your question now.
Well, first of all, can I say that I consider that your service has been doing absolutely sterling work, and I would ask, and I hope that the rest of the committee would join me in this, of sending our very best wishes and well done to you. I mean, you had a good Ofsted inspection report in December, but I know from experience of talking to one of my very close friends, who's one of your tutors, the amount of work that's been going on. So first of all, I'd just like to make that statement.
Thank you.
However, considering the impact of COVID and its inevitable fallout regarding loss of jobs and the need for retraining and the need to continue with the free education initiative, what additional funds may well be available to the service by way of central government, maybe the Mayor of London or even our own council? Because I was a bit concerned that we have got lower funds than many other West London boroughs. So is there any way of dipping our toe in the water in respect of any parcels of funds?
We watch out for them all the time. We have recently been allocated, and it's not just us, this was across London. The GLA allocated, in our case, an extra £100,000 for this academic year to focus on employment and trying to make sure that people who are at threat of redundancy or of not being in employment will be able to get back into it. So we've got that, and we're trying to work towards that. We have got a bit of a barrier with that, which is that it's come with strings attached, as they always do, and they want qualifications attached to it. So what I want to do is to be able to say to somebody we've got somebody actually who's a chartered surveyor who is now applied for a job as a tutor for us in a completely different area. I want to work with that person and say, what can we do? Let us help you develop your CV. Let us upskill you about this, that, or the other, whatever you need, and we'll help you sort of be in a position to go into another role. Unfortunately, it's not that easy because that person is unlikely to want to do some sort of employability qualification, which is the only way we can start to draw down that £100,000. So we are working on ways at the moment that we can do that. We already deliver some courses that fit. So we've got employability courses with all of our vocational qualifications also have employability qualifications attached, so that we run mock interviews with people, and so that before they go into work experience, they're interviewed by us before they go off. Things like that we can do already, we're already doing. But that's one of the ways in which we can do it. And if we're working at the moment to find appropriate qualifications that we can adapt to make them tick the box of your qualifications, but still meet those residents' needs. We are always on the lookout for funds. We've received £25,000 that was in the report that I mentioned earlier that we're using to buy more equipment, and we've just this week been approved for another £77,000 to top up the rest of the equipment, which is going to help a lot. One of the things we want to buy, for instance, we want to really increase our store of Chromebooks and laptops so that we can start a lend and loan service to residents. The issues we've got at the moment, it's going through the approvals at the moment. So, that is just going through the system, the council system. But the issue we've got is that everybody else wants to do the same thing. So actually trying to get hold of Chromebooks and laptops can be very difficult because the supply just isn't there. So we're working hard. We're sort of racing the clock to try to get those things in place. I think in terms of finding additional funding, we're pretty good at doing that. And if we find something, we go for it. In terms of the reasons that we are at that sort of lower end of the West London picture, these allocations are historical by something like 20 years, and they've never been reviewed. And there is talk intermittently from the GLA that they are going to look at them and try to identify where the need is and perhaps review who gets what in terms of those allocations across the boroughs. Of course, what you get are the boroughs with the additional funding aren't going to want to give them up, and those of us with slightly lower funds are fighting to try to get more. The one strategy I've been trying to employ, and actually it's really helped us this year, is that we are over-delivering. We are being, the GLA and the ESFA are getting massive value for money for us. We watch every penny that we spend, and we spend it wisely, and we get the best value we possibly can. So where we should be, I mean, probably last year I was with you, I think it was last year, we were something like 20% over delivered against our qualifications allocation, you know, which is unbelievable. They didn't pay us 20% more money, but we tried to demonstrate that we are over each year, so that each year we've now got a 3-year trend of being over allocated and over delivered against our funding allocation, because we're trying to show that there is a demand and that actually we are a good investment to the GLA. And this year it's meant that we've just been doing our figures today, and it's meant that we've come in against our GLA allocation. We're only 3% under what they allocated us, despite our lockdown, which is, I think, is quite amazing, to be quite honest. And that's because we worked so hard at the beginning to make sure that we never ever turn anybody away. We will always find the opportunity to bring that person in. We'll never say, sorry, we've used our funding, you can't come in. We will always make ends meet and make sure they get in there. And that's what's led to that. So we're hoping that when they do evaluations, that will stand us in good stead. But I don't know. I don't know whether it will. I'm just hoping it will. I hope the GLA will listen. Does that answer?
Thank you very, very much. I have got a follow-up, if I may.
You may.
Would a major review at this time, when you have got so much work to do on bidding for extra funding and trying to organise courses and etc., be a major distraction? It will take you away from the upfront work that you need to do in respect of COVID. And as I also consider that it would be best to leave a major review for a later time and just allow your service to get on with battling COVID and the implications of COVID.
From my perspective, I've never having been through a major review. I've read one of the reviews, but I haven't experienced it, so it's a little bit unknown to me. So it's difficult for me to say. What I would say is, in all honesty, at any point we have an Ofsted inspection or any major review, it's always the same. There's, you know, because of the nature of what we do, we're always battling too much work and not enough time and not enough staff. That's the truth of it, and I'm sure that's true of all council services, but definitely in education. I think you can pick any part of the sector and you'll get the same answer. So I think in terms of my perspective, if the group decides that you want to do a review on us now, that's absolutely fine. If you decide that you don't, that's absolutely fine. I mean, at whatever point we do it, we'll be busy and there'll be too much going on, and that's just how we work all the time. So, but also my understanding is that it's, I'm not sure that officers are very involved in it. From the impression I got, I think it's a lot about talking to the learners and, you know, other stakeholders. So I don't mean to talk you into it, but all I'm saying is I really appreciate the support and the idea that maybe doing it in 6 months or a year or something will make a difference. But honestly, there'll just be different pressures in a year. We're coming into Brexit, something else will change then. It's almost whenever we do it, we'll adapt to it. So whatever you decide, I'm happy with.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Debbie, and thank you for answering members' questions. This item to a close now to actually decide on the recommendation to whether the committee looks to proceed with this as a major review, and if so, we will proceed with a scoping report in the future work programme. Councillor Morgan, did you indicate?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Through you, can I just ask councillors and officers, if you're not speaking, could you turn your mics off? I seem to be getting a lot of feedback coming through here. Going on, I'd like to say a big thank you to Debbie for taking the time and for preparing this report. And I would like to just go with the officer's recommendations as stated in on page 9 of the report. Thank you.
Councillor Mavers.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the recommendation is that we consider this as a major review, and I think that that with a competent team that we have in this service, with questions and answers such as, you know, we still need to give this a bit more time. I'm not sure we'll be able to add much value to Hillingdon residents and to this service at this time in doing a review of this. I'm also concerned that, as we heard about the challenges of, if we want to hear learners, that those who are struggling to with digital aspects, those who are currently shielding, etc., they won't be able to fully engage with a I suppose a pandemic orientated review, because the access maybe to IT or the access to like a physical turn up would normally be the case before COVID. That would not necessarily be possible at the moment. I'm also concerned that there are other areas that really need a review, such as youth provision, youth career services, other aspects. Younger people are going to really struggle with employability, and they're going to really struggle with their own mental health. And there's a deafening silence in this council on our strategy for youth provision. And Councillor Simmons, when he was the cabinet member, did promise some updates on what that would look like. We've had 2 very good information reports about this adult service. It's in very good hands. I think our major review is better focused on a service that is good, which is youth services, but actually, as we were told in council, that youth services need to change because young people are no longer coming to centres, as we know that there's different voluntary groups that are involved in providing a youth offer, which could be struggling with COVID. I think that this area is one where our residents would expect us to support a service that needs to be reimagined, or maybe just needs to be have some attention drawn to it, such as youth services, rather than one that's already in very, very capable hands, who could probably get better from us later on down the journey, when COVID hopefully is a little more distant in our minds, and we're able to then reflect on, well, what lasting changes to learners did it make? What lasting changes to the offer did it make, and how can we correct those? And maybe the answer simply to one of the questions that in the report around, you know, what could be considered in review around funding, is that if we know that the GLA is putting the extra funding and is helping the service to adapt the way it works to become more digital, maybe the answer is just simply saying from this information item to Cabinet that they consider investing or even plugging the gap in the service in this budget year to help it be more COVID robust. That would be my recommendation, and I would recommend and suggest that we focus on youth services and careers guidance for young people within our major review.
Thank you, Councillor Mavers. I cannot see anyone else indicating. Councillor Sweeting, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, what we have here is a service that's been offsteaded, terrible phrase that, in December of last year, and have done such sterling work. This report has got a detailed roadmap of the way forward on where it's going, and I realise that there are issues relating to funding, and they're doing their very best to get whatever funding they can from various sources. So I come back to what Councillor Mathers was saying. We have youth service that is not matching up and is not actually delivering what our residents require it to deliver. And I've been looking at other activities that other boroughs are doing in respect of youth services, and there are all sorts of activities going on that seem to be light years away from what we're doing in Hillingdon. And I think we do need to think very, very seriously about a major review, because it's an area that takes quite a lot of time. There is evidence that is brought to the committee, and we do need to make certain that it's an area that basically needs our scrutiny, our in-depth scrutiny. And I don't think that we need to have an in-depth scrutiny of adult learning because it's there or thereabouts. But I do feel very, very strongly that we need to look very closely at our youth services, because other boroughs are doing such things of getting youth, young people into employment, building self-confidence, supporting educational attainment. All these are being done in the youth services of other boroughs, and with some of our youngsters not going to be attending school for COVID reasons and missing out on education, that seems to be a prime time now to look at youth services and in the way that they can be adapted and developed in this time of COVID. So I am very much in favour of looking at youth services rather than an area of service that's doing exceptionally well already.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeting. I take the points from yourself and Councillor Mavis regarding youth services. The recommendation set out on the item is that we look to potentially adopt this as a topic review. I believe there is a majority on this committee that wishes to proceed with that. However, I'm willing to take a vote if required. I myself recommend that we support the officer's recommendation and proceed with this as a topic review, whilst also taking on board the views raised by the Labour group.
I would like a vote to be taken, because I do feel very strongly about this, that I need to go back to my residents saying that we tried very, very hard to get our youth services under a critical eye.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeting. I'll bring in the Democratic Services Officer, Neil. Could you just advise on the voting process, please? Will you be overlooking this, or will you wish to do this myself as chairman?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. What I would suggest doing is doing an individual vote. So if you call the members' names and they can indicate whether they're for or against the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will go in the order as they appear on my screen. So Councillor Sweeting.
Against.
Councillor Sullivan.
For.
Councillor Rodriguez.
For.
Councillor Mavis.
Against.
Councillor Chapman.
For the officer's recommendation, Chairman.
Councillor Kaufman.
For.
Councillor Bardia.
For.
Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I can't actually vote on this because I lost connection for a couple of minutes.
I see. Thank you very much for clarifying, Councillor Morgan. Neil, could you just confirm Mr. Little has a vote on this committee, or is he non-voting?
As this is an education item, I think it'd be appropriate for Mr. Little to have a vote.
I believe so as well. Mr. Little?
For.
Thank you very much. That's now passed, so we will be looking at this as a topic review, and the scoping report will be coming before this committee in due course. Thank you very much, and thank you also to Debbie for your attendance and answering the questions. We move now on to item 6, which is the changes to school admissions criteria, pages 21 to 44. Good evening to Laura. Whenever you're ready, please give your presentation.
Chairman. Yes, I'd like to talk you through the reports that you've got regarding changes to the school admission criteria for Hillingdon community schools. So the school admission code states quite clearly that admission authorities must set and review their admission arrangements annually. So where changes are proposed to those arrangements, we must have a public consultation. So Hillingdon at the moment have started that consultation, and we are consulting for 8 weeks. That began on the 5th of October and will run until the 30th of November. And it's proposing changes to the admissions criteria to be implemented in September 2022. So just a bit of background on that. The local authority last consulted on changes in October 2015 for changes that took effect in September 17. And some of the additional criteria that we implemented at the time no longer has a relevance and may be deemed as unclear or unreasonable. So based on a review of the admissions to reception school places in Hillingdon over the last 4 years, there is a residual risk that the current admissions criteria may no longer serve the purpose, which is reducing the chance of applicants not receiving a school placement. So in order to increase the opportunity for local families to access places, the council is proposing some changes. So I'll talk through briefly what those changes are. So firstly, we have children of staff that are working at a community school. So this already exists within the existing admissions criteria, and it's currently given as a criterion 8 priority. And it's for where members of staff are recruited to fill a vacant post for which there is a demonstrable skills shortage. Now, the local authority is consulting to change that criteria to award it a higher priority. And this will further assist schools with the current recruitment and retention difficulties that some may be experiencing. A second change that we're proposing is medical criteria. So the current arrangements already consider children or an immediate family member who suffer from a long-term medical or psychological condition, which makes it necessary for them to attend a particular school. So this is only a small change. What we're proposing is to remove the word psychological from the criterion and replace it with social. And the reason for this is this ensures that we're consistent with what the wording is within the school admissions code. And it still allows applicants who wish to apply under psychological, for reasons such as psychological conditions, they can still cite these grounds and it will still be considered under medical or social criteria moving forward. Third change is for the nodal point. The nodal point we're proposing to remove is the one that is for Deansfield Primary School. Now, we have at the moment, this is in place where we currently allow 15 of the 90 places that are allocated to children who live closest to the nodal point. The local authority want to remove that nodal point now, as it no longer serves pupils that are living further distance from the school with little or no access to other schools. We believe there are sufficient access to alternative schools, so we propose to remove that. And lastly is the reduction of the published admission number for Ruislip Gardens School. So as an education authority, the borough must plan the sufficiency of places and efficient use of resources. And there has been a slight decline in demand across primary sector since 2012 with some fluctuations. And therefore it's necessary to reduce the plan in Ruislip Gardens to ensure that it best meets the needs of the schools and pupils in the borough, and we're making effective use of our resources. So we're proposing to reduce that PAN, published admission number, from 90 to 60 from 2022. Now that will also impact on the distance priority that's currently attached to that. So it will reduce the distance priority from 1,000 metres down to 750 metres, and that'll be in line with the admission arrangements. So the head teacher and the governors are in support of that proposal to help secure the stability of the school role and the budget. So the next steps really are the consultation will end on the 30th, as I said. The paper will return to Cabinet, will propose to Cabinet in January, informing them of all of the consultation responses and await their approval for the changes. And then we have a statutory deadline of the 28th of February to determine what our arrangements are. And then if the changes are agreed, then they will take effect from September 22. So as part of one of the recommendations was to also consider responses that we've had at the moment. We've only had 3 responses, even though it's been up since October. So out of those 3 responses, they are all in support of the changes. There is only one response where individuals said that they were not in support of giving staff criteria a higher priority, as they felt that actually children living closest to the school should receive priority above staff children. So that's the only response we've had so far. So I would welcome any questions about this.
Thank you very much, Laura. I invite questions from members. Mr. Little.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you. The criteria that's changing to have social reasons as opposed to psychological, what would be covered by social? And who decides?
Yeah. It can be quite broad. It could be, we've had a number of reasons for social. Sometimes it could be due to maybe quite an exceptional circumstance that might have happened to that family, and they feel that a particular school, perhaps it might be close to a childcare arrangement, that they feel that it would have a particular priority for that school. It's very rare that we would consider it, because we feel that all schools generally should be able to manage any children's additional needs or any support that should be put in place for them. But we do put it in there to ensure that we can give a fair hearing to that. In regards to who makes that decision, we have to have an admissions committee in place to either agree it or decline that request. We currently have 3 panel members that would review all of those, and they may be existing members of the school placement admissions team, or we sometimes may call on other members such as education psychologists to join in those discussions depending on what the needs are. And whatever the outcome is, we would always write back to those applicants, informing them, and we do also invite them to maybe submit further information if what they've previously submitted hasn't given a positive outcome for them. So it's not always the end of the discussions. If it's not agreed, there is always a door to continue to have discussions, because we appreciate that there are many situations that impact on families and why they make the decisions that they do in regards to their school applications.
So under current arrangements, if somebody offered such a reason, would they still be considered?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there will be a box in regards to how the application looks, and it will say, do you wish to, if it's online, if it's a paper, it will be asking you specifically, do you wish to apply under this criteria? So it would be down to that applicant to then tick that. And then the wording on that question is just simply going to say medical or social. What the applicant decides to submit is up to them. If they wish to discuss psychological concerns or anything else, that would be in their supporting evidence. It's more so about how the question's worded.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Laura, for your report. Can you give me a reason why Rysick Gardens School is decreasing in pupil numbers from 90 to 60? Do you think it's anything to do with the fact that the building is in a real poor state? And are we going to actually continue to develop that school given the sort of reduction in pupil numbers?
Thank you. In regards to that school's had low numbers, as the Cabinet report shows, for a significant number of years. Anecdotally, from some parents that we talk to, it's quite often it can literally be the traffic that goes along that route that some parents, unless they're living very close to that school, wouldn't necessarily detour off, that would then face, you know, a quite difficult journey with the traffic on that route in the mornings. They did, I think in 2019, they received a good Ofsted. You know, they're a popular school, but they're for children that live very close by. And I think it literally is the journey that impacts on that school. But in regards to the development of the site, if Dan's on, I wonder if Dan would like to comment on that, which is probably more in Dan's remit than myself.
Thanks, Laura. I hope everyone can hear me. The school is part of the capital programme, and I know that there have been some works undertaken at that school in recent years, and as I understand it, the school is on the forward programme for works, but we've not had feedback from parents that that's been an issue.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kaufman, do you wish to have a follow-up?
No, Chairman, that's fine. Did you hear that, Chairman? No, I.
What, Councillor Bridges, have you frozen? We may just need to. Oh, you're speaking. Go.
You've appeared on my screen. Yes, it seems to have. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but you're a bit garbled. It looks like you're back now, Councillor. Yes.
Okay,
Thank
I'll
you.
try and continue, and if not, I may have to dial out and come back
Yeah,
in
no,
again.
you look all right now. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sweeting was the next one to ask a question. Councillor Sweeting, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair.
Okay.
I think I'm just noting the relatively minor changes to admissions, but I'd like to bring us back to page 31 and the area 5, the education planning area 5, which has Ruislip Gardens at the top. And I'm just looking at the numbers, and if you look at year 6, that would be admissions in 2014. So the major scheme, I believe, the expansion took place in 2013. So it would appear that nowhere in the sort of history of the increased PAN has Ruislip Gardens gone above its old PAN of 60. And if this is the case, then and I'll ask the question again that I always ask, have we put too many additional places in that area? Because it would appear that there's a whole form of entry that's gone in, and there has been considerable money spent on that scheme. And I recognise that it is important to take out that form of entry, but the added problem with that is it will actually leave very little wriggle room in area 5, will it not? Looking at the number of unfilled places in reception, it would give only about 2.8% of unfilled places. So there's two parts to the question. Did we put in, too many places right from the start in 2013? And if we take them out, does it leave very little wriggle room for admissions that may well fluctuate again?
Chairman, it's Dan Kennedy. Shall I step in and answer that question, the question?
Yes, please, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeting. Just to comment on the point about whether there are too many places added to the primary system. I mean, I would say that school places forecasting isn't an exact science, and at the time that those additional places were commissioned, which would have been some couple of years before then, so almost 10 years ago now, when that decision would have been made or the forecast was considered, that the need for those extra places would have been based on a sound forecast at that time, and obviously the situation can change over time. I think in terms of the second part of that question about are there sufficient places in the system in area 5 if those places are removed, I think what we can say is that should there be an increase in demand, we have the flexibility in the system to reopen additional school places. In this case, at Ruislip Gardens, should the need arise.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Councillor Sweeting, do you wish to follow up?
Yes, I'm interested in why there was a major expansion of places at the school, because if you look underneath to the next school in that list, that's Bourne. They had a bulge class. If you look at the year 6 numbers at 51, they obviously had a bulge class. So there was additional accommodation put in just for 1 year or maybe 2 years, which would have cost the council a lot less, and did cost the council a lot less. So my question is, why didn't we look at Ruislip Gardens having a bulge class rather than a major expansion?
The decision obviously was made almost 10 years ago now. We would obviously have to look at what was going on at the time, but I can only imagine that the decision was made because members have made a commitment to provide permanent places where there was a demonstrable need based on the forecast at that time, to avoid the need for bulge classes or interim or temporary accommodation. And we do have some very good quality school buildings now as a result, with modern learning facilities. So, but it was clearly the right decision at that time based on the forecast.
I agree.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members wishing to ask questions? I cannot see any others indicating. Councillor Sweeting, do you have any more questions you wish to ask?
Question, but a request.
Yep.
I found the information on that area 5. You know, the schools in that area and the numbers on roll in that area very, very useful. And I don't know whether anybody else on the committee also found that useful. I know that when we look at school places in our January report and we're looking at surplus, maybe we could have that information on all of the 14 education planning areas, and that will then give us a hook on the schools, certain schools that are taking out PAN, and the reasons for taking out PAN permanently, and some year groups where we're taking out PAN. So it's a request.
Are the officers comfortable with they can do that in terms of additional workload? If they are, then I'm more than happy to agree.
We can provide that additional information, Councillor Bridges.
Okay. In which case, more than happy to go along with Councillor Sweeting's suggestion. Okay. There's no other members indicating, so thank you both to Dan and Laura for their attendance this evening. And you may leave if you wish to do so. We now move on to agenda item 7. It's our Cabinet Floor Plan, pages 45 to 50. Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Sweeting?
The Cabinet Forward Plan now includes the proposed site for the new secondary school in the north of the borough. So that's just I think these papers were printed before that information on the forward plan was made available. But it would have been interesting to have had that information come into our POC before it goes to Cabinet, so that we could at least have had a few comments that might have fed into the Cabinet report.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeting. Sorry, Councillor Kaufman, did you say something? Did you wish to say anything? I saw you indicate.
No,
Or was
Chair.
your mic just left on? Okay, thank you. With that said, we'll note the Cabinet Forward Plan. Agenda item 8 is our work programme, pages 51 to 54. Any questions or comments? I know Councillor Sweeting had some liaison with the clerk outside the meeting regarding the change around the work programme. Neil, do you wish to say anything?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Just to reiterate that, so a couple of things. Firstly, following the request made at previous committee meeting regarding surplus, I have agreed now that the quarterly school places planning report coming in January will include a specific section on surplus to discuss that. In addition, at the most recent meeting, Councillor Mathers requested that the item on early years provision be brought forward to January. That was agreed, but it was then decided that actually the January meeting agenda is substantially full, and therefore Councillor Mathers kindly agreed to for that to be reverted back to February, so that'll be considered at February. And that's it, I believe. Let me just double check whether I have anything else to say. No, that's it. Thank you, Councillor.
Was it?
Oh, actually, sorry, there was one thing. I knew there was one thing. I don't know whether the members would just want to get through any comments they have first, but it'd be great before we conclude this item if members could just give a bit of a steer to officers who are due to write reports for the next couple of meetings, particularly that early years provision update, Councillor Mathers, just so they can make sure that their reports are covering the detail that councillors wish them to cover. Thank you.
Those who have their hands up, I have noted you, so you can put them down if you like. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. Just firstly, in terms of the work plan, as the youth services area was not considered as part of a major review, I do wonder if we could have an update March onwards on the service, particularly its response during COVID and what its future strategy is. We heard a lot in the last update, whenever it was, I think it was last year, about the numbers that had been reached and particularly the Fiesta programme and some of the voluntary sector response. But it'd be useful to find out kind of what is the strategic plan and how is the youth service going to complement the challenges that the country is facing and the local residents of Hillingdon will face post-pandemic or during this ongoing pandemic. And in terms of early years, just in terms of direction, so I'm aware of, I mean, it's not so much about the few children's centres that closed a couple of years ago, but during that time there was a major restructure of the service, and I suppose it's about the success of that restructure and what the service will look like going forward, assuming that it either maintains like the success of that restructure, and then if it wasn't successful, what what the proposed plans are to kind of sustain and develop that service. So it's just kind of looking back over now that there's been a settling in of that initial restructure and totally transformation of the service. What does it look like now, and what more is going to be done to improve the offer for early years?
Does that help you, Neil?
Yes, it does. Just to double check then, so the idea for a further update on youth services, is that agreed from the committee as a whole?
I'm happy to go with that. Our April meeting looks quite like, maybe we can put it on that if the committee's happy to do so. Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Mr. Little, did you indicate?
Yes, Chair. The forward programme includes a line on an update on the new SEN strategy, but doesn't give any date for it. Do we have any indication of what the timescale might be?
Not yet, unfortunately, Mr. Little. I will pursue that again.
Thank you.
Councillor Sweeting, did you wish to comment earlier? I don't know if I missed you. Apologies if I did.
It's okay. I thought that we were also going to let the ASBIT fines and prosecutions going to be slipping as well. I think we did have discussions. I don't know whether that was confirmed or not.
Yes, sorry, that was included in the updated work programme that I sent around.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you.
I've just got my hard copy here. Yes.
I should have clarified that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I cannot see anyone else indicating, so are we all happy to note the work programme given those points raised? Yes, thank you very much. And that's it for this evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your attendance and wish you all a pleasant evening. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Chairman.
Good night.
Bear in mind we are still live.
Could I have a quick word with you at the end of the meeting?
Yes, after. Yes, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.